Eighth grader?
Yeah, so we'll hear. 20 seconds is what we're supposed to hear when they email you.
Take your seat.
Yes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the combined workshop and special meeting of your Board of Trustees this January 8th, 2018, and Happy New Year. To honor our nation's heroes and especially to honor the men and women in uniform who serve our community, please rise with us and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk Fitzgerald, may we have the roll call, please?
Certainly, Madam President. Trustee Hansen?
Here.
Trustee Timmick?
Here.
Trustee Allen?
Here.
Trustee Rudolph?
Here.
Trustee Sifferman?
Here.
Trustee Tyrrell?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Does any trustee wish to add or delete any item from tonight's agenda? Hearing none, we move on to the portion of our meeting where we open it up to the public to address the board. This is our citizen comments. Is there anyone in the audience today who wishes to approach the board? Ms. Quinlan? Welcome.
Thank you. Is this turned on?
You have to push it up.
Good evening. I'm Mary Ann Quinlan. I live at 5141 Woodland in Western Springs. For some months now, I have been following the issue of minimum wage and earned sick leave that was voted on by the Cook County, but was opted out by our village and numerous other villages. I would like the board to reverse its decision, and which was the opt-out decision. Since your vote, the state has acted. The legislature passed passed a statewide minimum wage law, but the governor vetoed it, not unexpectedly. There's also been a federal tax cut that benefits primarily high-income individuals and also business owners. There's an opportunity to relook at this based on the prior Board of Trustees offered an opportunity to relook at this on December 31st. I think any village at any time could relook at it, but you were gracious enough to put a time frame on that. During the 7 months since that decision, people have gone on to other things, always knowing that the 12/31 date was there. So when I woke up and saw that this is on the agenda, I started rallying the troops again. There have been, I think I counted yesterday, 160 signatures. At least 100 of them, I'm absolutely certain, are all Western Springs residents who have asked the board to reconsider its decision. We can get more signatures, we can get more emails to you, we can get people to contact the businesses. I'm not sure what information you really need beyond the fact that the voters voted for similar laws in prior referenda. I know you're considering possibly doing another non-binding referendum that would focus just on Western Springs workers. And I do believe that would be a needless delay, somewhat more of expense possibly, and it continues the process that's been, anything but transparent and anything but working toward a common agreement. I think that the residents, at least the ones that I'm working with, have not changed their position, and I understand that the Business Association has not either. So I believe we need a different process, and I ask you to consider other ways of resolving this, or asking other people to get together to resolve it, rather than go to referendum. I anticipate that the results of a referendum would be favorable to restoring those rights, but it's still non-binding, and I have no idea, no clue as to what it will take to get the board to vote differently. We do have new board members. It's possible that now that they've had a chance to be acclimated, that they may have some fresh perspectives, and so I do appreciate that you're bringing it up for discussion at the board.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Public speaking.
Public comment, yes.
Comment section. Well,
Please use the microphone.
My name is Richard Mann.
Sorry, you have to turn it back on this slide,
Is it back
though.
on?
Yes.
Okay. I hope it's on.
Yes.
Is it on?
I think.
Okay.
Oh, it's
Push
not?
it on? Push it up. Green light. Hope it's on. Hi. Richard Mann. I'm a Village of LaGrange. Forgive me, I'm from LaGrange. Resident, that I wanted to come to you and speak to an issue that is near and dear to me. And I come to Western Springs quite often, and I use the Western Springs True Value. And I have no monetary gain from coming here to speak regarding the True Value. But I've been in business my entire career since I got out of college, and I take seriously the idea of a business succeeding and having the tools necessary to succeed. And I've gone to I'm familiar with the other hardware stores in the area, and Horton's in the Grange, and Menards, and Home Depot. And I think that, I hope that Western Springs is taking seriously the effect that the construction and the success with the new pizzeria and the gym are having on downtown Western Springs, and that's good to see. But it's apparently not good to see for the True Value. And the normal floor traffic that I've seen when I've gone, I go in there every 2 weeks or so, and they've helped me with electrical issues and plumbing and glazing and all different things that I do on my own house. I do a lot of the repairs that I try to do. Ever since my uncle told me that I'm pretty handy and I can do most any repairs. I give it a shot, and frankly, you have a resource that we really don't have in many communities. If you look around here, you don't get that kind of help at the hardware, at the Home Depot or Menards. And True Value knows what they're doing. They've got the resources, and when they're busy, they've got people on staff that are plumbing background, electrical background, floor screens, everything else. I mean, that store really can do just about everything, and has helped me through a myriad of issues. And they have zero floor traffic. And I've been in there, and I've been very alarmed to see, I've worked in the paper industry most of my career and seen an industry basically going away for the last 20 years. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Tribune and the New York Times and some of the other papers, but throughout the paper industry, it's been in serious decline for 20 years now. And not only the newsprint business. But as far as the True Value is concerned, on point, that is a hurting business. And to see them not have floor traffic, whether it's a result of the construction from the replacement of the what's going on with the tracks and the building along the tracks, whatever the case may be, every time I've been into the True Value in the last few months, they have virtually no business. And I don't know what you people can do about it. I've been in LaGrange for many years. I was a parking commissioner for 15 years. We finally put together, with many parking surveys, a garage that was very divided in the community, and that's a different issue entirely, but I think what you're looking at is you do have really underutilized lots across from the V restaurant And next to, or actually behind where that current, the new gym has moved. The gym has moved from across the tracks.
Sorry, make sure you're speaking the microphone, please.
Sorry, to the other side of the tracks. And now the parking along the front of that block is pretty well shot. And it doesn't appear that parking has been routed to go into some of these empty lots. And I understand that the lots are not cooperative, and there's issues with owners, and the other thing, you have staff and you have people that are really hopefully working on issues like that. I do not know, I'm not involved with any of the politics in Western Springs, but I had seen in the Grange the fight that took place right to the last minute to get the garage in, and half the village wanted it and half the village didn't, and it was about 200 votes apart, and then it finally was put in with a tax put in the garage. But in the meantime, in the interim, all I'm concerned about is conveying to you, a person who utilized and has benefited tremendously from a good business that does a good job in the area. And other than LaGrange Park, where there's an ace, there's a shortage of hardware stores that have staff that can get the job done and can help you as a homeowner. And so I think that all I'm here to do is to convey, I have no financial gain with the Village True Value hardware store. But I do appreciate them, and I have met over the years many of the people that work there and appreciate everything that they've done for me as one person and a homeowner, and a homeowner that uses a good business. And I hope that the Village of Western Springs can bring together the resources and maybe get those lots utilized. Maybe the gym can put all their parking behind the gym, and the bakery, I understand, is also hurting, and not having the ability for customers to just pull up and walk in and get their normal cakes and what have you. And so you've got two real good businesses side to side and side by side, and I think that certainly Village True Value is struggling, and I haven't been in the bakery. I can't really speak for them, but I've heard from the people in the True Value that they are hurting too, and I would hope that the village is aware of it. I don't know if you guys are or not, but I want to make you aware of it, and I hope that we could intervene and get something going where people have better parking than just taking up the front spots, which are the only ones that Cushbaums and Village True Value have to use. Their people aren't really going to be able to go anywhere else.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. And as we look at our parking issues, and we know we have them, we'll keep your comments in mind. Right now, we do have some construction going on with the East Train platform that has taken up quite a few spaces too. That's temporary, but of course still an inconvenience for customers of those establishments. But thank you for the time to come out here and let us know your thoughts.
Well, I know how tough it is for a business, and when if they have to go a couple of months and things are hard, I don't know anything about the finances, but I would imagine that it's pretty easy for a business to struggle and then no longer make it. And I just want to intervene as much as I can, and I hope the village would intervene as much as they can. And I reflect on when the parking garage was going in at the Grange, there was a lot of it from business owners to get something going so we're not always fighting with commuters. Because I don't no idea what the commuter situation is like in Western Springs, but in the Grange, the commuters were a huge impact, draining the ability of businesses, the ability of businesses to be able to keep going when the commuters would just come in, park their car, and run off to Chicago for the day. So that, but I appreciate being able to come in here and speak to you.
Thank you.
And I
Thank you.
appreciate that hopefully the village can do something to keep a great little hardware store like that going, because it is much better than the Menards and the Home Depot. And firsthand, I can tell you for 10, 15 years that they really get the job done. And I appreciate you for having that Village True Value hardware store.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for
the
bringing
time
it to our attention.
Be able to come in and speak.
Sure. Thank you. Anybody else?
On? On. Hi, my name is Mitzi Norton. I'm a resident of Brookfield. I live at 3841 Morton Avenue in Brookfield. I frequently visit your businesses here in Western Springs, and I understand that residents of Brookfield work in Western Springs and vice versa. So I too just wanted to briefly comment. I wanted to thank you, first of all, for potentially bringing the workers' rights ordinances for Cook County back to the table here in Western Springs. I was part of a small group in Brookfield that was talking to our board about it. And so I just wanted to touch upon a very few points. Increasing the minimum wage, in terms of increasing the minimum wage, we're talking about improving the lives of your adults here, your adult workers here in Western Springs. What we know is that 88% of minimum wage earners are at least 20 years old. Nearly 36% of minimum wage earners are at least 40 years old, and the average age of a minimum wage earner is 35. So oftentimes people think these are teenagers, but we're not talking about teenagers or even young adults. 3 out of 5 workers earning minimum wage are employed in service occupations, so your business, your restaurants. And in terms of earned paid sick days, they benefit our economy and our public health. Workers could use paid sick time not only to recover from illness, but to seek preventative care, to take care of a family member, a parent, or a child, or just as important, escape a domestic violence situation. People who are able to stay home when they're sick prevent the spread of illness and keep us all healthier. And we don't want anyone who works here in Western Springs to risk losing their monthly grocery budget or even their job because they are sick or leaving a violent home. So I really think that paid sick days are a win-win. I would hate to see the residents of Western Springs pitted against Western Springs businesses because it's bad policy. Opting out in some ways creates a negative image to the public of who we are here in the western suburbs of Chicago and Cook County. And so again, I just wanted to repeat that I'm very happy to see that you're considering doing this again. I would ask that you consider doing this as quickly as possible. I think it could really benefit your workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? No. Moving on to other business. Is there any other business tonight? No. All right, we'll now move to the committee reports. Each trustee chairs one of our committees and reports on the activities of their committee over the last month. No, first we have the resolution
About the sexual harassment.
about the sexual harassment. Is that before the committee reports?
Yes.
That's,
Okay.
no, that's at the.
It should actually begin, it's item number 7.
It's number 7.
Some-
Oh, okay.
So,
Somehow I didn't have the, well, anyway, moving on. Trustee Allen, Public Works and Water.
Thank you, President Gallagher. For the last couple of years, we've spent a lot of time with infrastructure, the roads, the deep wells, the shallow well, a potential new well, the water treatment plant, water distribution, stormwater, water rates, water tanks, sewer televising, and last but not least, sidewalks. And importantly, the long-range plans to how to address those. For those of you that like that kind of thing, you won't be disappointed, as there will be an update on that briefly in a minute. However, it's also very important to occasionally reflect that this infrastructure would not function properly without the people to support and maintain it. We should all remind ourselves not to take this for granted. Beginning of 2018, Chicago ushered in the coldest temperature in nearly 50 years. Temperatures remained below 20 degrees for 12 consecutive days, tying the record first set in 1895. On Tuesday, January 2nd, it started with wind chill advisory for the Chicago area with wind chills of -25 to -35 degrees below zero. According to the National Weather Service, frostbite could occur in as little as 10 minutes of skin exposure. By Wednesday, January 3rd, the severe weather had started to adversely impact our infrastructure, causing 5 significant water main breaks throughout the village. 629 Cortlandt Circle by South Campus, 1354 Oak Street, 147th Street across from Mariano's, 204 Dirks Court in Springdale, and 1400 Maple Street in Old Town. Fixing water main repairs are difficult and uncomfortable in normal weather, requiring digging several feet below ground with mud and water spewing. In sub-zero weather such as we had last week, these must have been absolutely brutal, and with water levels falling in our towers, they were critical, demanding literally an around-the-clock effort for several days. I really don't know how the men and women of our Municipal Services Department accomplished this. We are very fortunate to have such dedicated and caring staff that look after our village like it was their own. Director Supert, on behalf of this board and the other thousands of residents, we wanted to publicly acknowledge the work that your team did, and please extend our sincere gratefulness to the entire team for this extraordinary accomplishment. Thank you. As promised, now back to the regular. We have 3 routine contract renewals. All amounts are in the 2018 budget. All vendors are ones we have worked with before and have had favorable experiences with. They honored their contract prices from prior years. To briefly go over, sewer televising as Chicago Trenchless and Rehabilitation. Their 2018 plan is Old Town South and Fairview Estates, and their budget is $90,000. The second contract up for renewal is with sidewalk shaving. This is with Safe Step. This is where they just grinded out the ledge to make it a more even surface and reduce the trip hazard. But this saves the expense of a full removal and replacement. This budget is for $50,000. Lastly, there's a renewal for our annual sidewalk replacement with Schroeder and Schroeder. It's also for $50,000. The village will replace sidewalk squares with 1 1/4 inch trip hazard. Important though, residents can request replacement of other sidewalks with a 60-40, 60 being the resident, 40 being the village share, subject to budget availability. The focus this year will be on Ridge Acres and the Field Park areas. When you see in your packet the joint contracted rates with several other villages in the nearby suburbs was really primarily to save money. We discussed this last week at Public Works and Water, and along with staff recommended that go into omnibus on January 22nd at our next board meeting if there aren't any questions.
No,
Okay.
we'll put that on the omnibus. Thank you.
Thank you. With respect to the 2018 capital projects, we have 2 carryover projects, the Ridgewood Oaks Basin and the Rose Garden water main replacement. The update on Rose Garden is that there will be a 3rd meeting with residents later this month. They are working with Unique Plumbing on looking at whether they want to do some upgrades to their interior of their houses as well too, and possibly if that would lower the cost of this overall project for the connection onto the street. So more to come on that. The other major project that we'll be tracking in 2018 is the roadway project, the roadway program rather, for $1.6 million. The likely construction areas are Johnson Avenue between 45th and 47th Street and Lawn Avenue from 47th to Burlington. If there are no other questions, that's the update on the capital projects. And I return it to President Gallagher. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Allen. Moving on to Property and Rec Committee, Trustee Hansen.
Thank you, President Gallagher. I just have 2 items tonight that are both sort of routine. They're contract renewals. The first one is for the tree trimming service provided by Winkler's Tree Service. They've agreed to renew the 2018 contract at 2016 prices, which are listed in your packet. And as you can see from their costs, their prices are the least of the 3 companies that had bid this in 2016. So the staff is pleased with their work and recommends the renewal of that contract. The other contract the staff is also pleased with is Unimax Management Corporation provides janitorial services to Village Hall, both fire stations, the train depot, and the reverse osmosis water treatment plant. And again, staff is is very pleased with their work and has recommended that we review the contract for 2018 at the 2017 prices. So those items would be placed on the omnibus if there were no objection. Any questions?
No.
I do have one. It actually relates to Richard's, the LaGrange resident that spoke earlier. Could either you or Director Scott comment about the downtown parking. Isn't that project sort of in the works? Just briefly, that we are
It is.
in the middle of a study, and
I think that,
the downtown parking study.
the downtown parking study, yeah. Do you want, Marty, do you want to handle that? Thank
Sure,
you.
I can give a quick update if you'd like.
Mhm.
Earlier today, I sent the board draft recommendations and a report that outlines the findings of the consultant, Sam Schwartz Transportation Group. It gives existing conditions and then follows up with their recommendations. So in the email, I asked the board to take a look at that over the next couple of weeks, and then we're going to schedule an open house for the public and for WISBA members to come and give their feedback and ultimately bringing that back to the village board for approval. So it's got some good recommendations that have been vetted through the staff and discussed back and forth with the consultant. So I think you'll be pleased with the end result of it.
Thank you.
And did that bring in the Business Association as well, too?
Yes, there were stakeholder interviews along the
Okay.
way with the business owners.
Thank you, Marty.
So that concludes my report.
Okay, we'll add those items to the omnibus. I see it's the contract renewal time of year.
Yes,
so-
yes, yeah.
All right, thank you. Moving on to general government, Trustee Tinnick.
Thank you, President Gallagher. 3 items to cover this evening. The first one is actually the one that we are going to take action on this evening, which is the resolution authorizing and improving an updated harassment policy to conform to Illinois Public Act 100-0554. So this is actually the item I covered in our last meeting. The urgency here is that we do have a deadline of the 16th that we need to take action to then be in line with the state requirement. So no real changes from the update last week, other than we will be voting on this evening.
Thank you.
Next one after that, in terms of contracts, keeping with the theme, village staff has been looking at alternatives for our current occupational health provider. They gave us an update in the last general government meeting and had suggested AMITA might be a good alternative for us. We gave them the go-ahead to investigate and move forward. They've come back, and actually we are now close to being able to review and vote on a contract with AMITA. It's going through its final changes and updates at the moment. There's a draft resolution already in place. So the goal would be is to vote on this on the 22nd as well. The only question would be is whether we include it on the omnibus or not, because nobody actually has the draft contract as of yet. So if it's provided in advance of the meeting, and I think if people are comfortable that they've had enough time to review it, we would keep it in the omnibus. Otherwise, we could break it out and discuss it separately. So you should all be receiving that draft shortly.
Very good.
Okay. And then the next one, and this one, I want to make sure I give this proper due. We had a little bit of a preview based on some of our residents' comments on this, but this is the discussion around the concept of having an advisory referenda added to the November ballot to solicit feedback from the residents in terms of what the board should do around the original action in May of opting out of the Cook County ordinances on minimum wage and sick leave. So when we did vote to opt out, that was done for a few different reasons, which I'll just go through just to remind everybody. You know, one of them, and the primary reason is that, you know, we were just on the heels of an election. We had a new president coming in as well as 3 new board members. We felt that this was a significant enough issue that we wanted the full board and then the new board to have an opportunity to get in place and review this and make a decision in terms of how the village should act. We also had hoped that there would be some action at the state level. Unfortunately, as Ms. Quinlan mentioned, the legislature did put a bill in front of our governor. The governor chose to veto it relative to the minimum wage, and nothing's been done from a sick leave perspective. So we have no action at the state level. We do have the requirement that we put on ourselves to revisit this after the year end. The reason that we thought the referendum might be an attractive way to move forward is that I think we have more information to provide to the residents now that some things have potentially, I'll say, changed since when we first looked at this. One is we actually now have the specifics of the Cook County ordinances. What we didn't have when the referendum was on the ballot before was it was more of a theoretical sort of statement, and was, should the state do this? And it didn't give the specifics about what the numbers looked like. It didn't give the specifics about that it would be Cook County by itself versus the statewide sort of action. And also, too, and I think that this is critical, is that in the meantime, approximately 3/4 or more of the other towns or municipalities within the county actually have opted out as well, and most of those don't have the obligation to go back and revisit this. They just have sort of said they're done, they've opted out. So we've decided to take this on, and I think what the thought coming out of the General Government Committee is that because of these changes and some of the other factors that have gone on since we've last voted on this, it might be worthwhile to solicit feedback from the residents again and try to make sure that they understand specifically what we would be taking action on, and make sure that we make a decision that really is in the best interest of the residents. We met as a General Government Committee just prior to this meeting. Ms. Quinlan participated there, as well as a resident of LaGrange who shared some additional input. Mike O'Brien from the business WISBA was there as well to give some feedback in terms of their view on these things. And so now what I'd like to do is solicit feedback from my fellow trustees in terms of what they think would be an appropriate course of action here.
So this is regarding whether to put it on the referendum or not?
Correct. Whether we should put a referendum out there to get that feedback from the residents. Do we feel that we have enough information or the pulse of the residents already to take action? Or is there some other approach that we might want to consider?
I guess, Trustee Timick, that would be my question, is how would we solicit that additional feedback? I mean, I appreciate the point that there might be an opportunity for more education, but I think it also could be confusing to have it on the ballot again when I think a lot of voters would feel appropriately that they have already voted on it. So I think it would take quite a bit of outreach and education to make clear why it is on the ballot again.
Okay.
Personally, I also appreciate the other municipalities who have voted, their boards have voted to opt out, and that we are reconsidering it. And I mean, I would appreciate, as a new trustee, the opportunity for us as a board, all of us as a new board, to continue to discuss this. Personally, I would prefer to act faster rather than wait until November for another referendum.
And just also as a point of clarification there as well too, when we first had considered this, we had thought about trying to get it on the March ballot, but at that point I think we had less than maybe 10 days or something at that point to get something drafted, approved, and get it onto the ballot in time. So that's what pushes it out to November. That certainly was not our first choice. It definitely does extend things out
Yeah,
further.
understood.
Yeah.
What minimum wage rate was on the original ballot that was passed?
I don't believe there were.
There was. It was, excuse me, the initial referendum.
The Cook County one?
This was actually, there was a 2014 statewide referendum that dealt with minimum wage. That was, the question was, shall the minimum wage in Illinois for adults over the age 18 be raised to $10 per hour by January 1, 2015? So it was a 2014 question put to the statewide on November 4th, 2014, dealing with a $10 minimum wage question. And then the Cook County minimum wage and sick leave referendum was a 2016 referendum put to the voters on November 8th of 2016.
You know, on that point, I note that the draft here, which is included in the packet, is considerably more detailed. It seems as if the referendum that we're considering providing in November is quite extensive with these graduated steps, $10, $11, 12, 13, and then the 2.5% cap. Is it my understanding that that was not the original referendum? The 3 years ago referendum, this is much more detailed?
Yeah, I mean, here's the bottom line. I drafted a memo to kind of bring information together. I wanted, at the request of some board members, and I wanted to share that with everybody tonight. The request came to me over the weekend, so I got it done this afternoon. The referendum questions that you see are really just a starting point, even if you go that direction. And as the memo indicates, you can put together 3 advisory, non-binding referendum questions as a municipal board. The draft has 2. You can break this up into more questions. You place 3 on a ballot. And I think it goes to Trustee Rudolph's point is, you know, voter confusion, voter clarity, voter understanding. I mean, you can see from my memo what the prior, referendum questions were. Unfortunately, you have a minimum wage, Cook County minimum wage ordinance that was tiered, that has multiple tiers, and that's reflected in what I put together, because if you're really going to bring this back to the voters, they really should know what all those tiers were.
The original referendum was not tiered.
Was not tiered to that extent. It certainly didn't talk about the CPI, inflator at the very end of the tier. That's one of the challenges with dealing with this, and dealing with any advisory referendum question, which is different from a binding referendum question, is communicating a question that gets a fair response that you're looking for. And, so what I gave you was a starting point, but by no means is it, what I'm recommending. It's just a placeholder, and it gives you the actual guts, so to speak, of the Cook County sick leave policy and the Cook County minimum wage policy.
So that current stepping up each year, that's consistent with Cook County?
With what's been adopted by Cook County right
okay.
now.
So to Trustee Allen's question, right? So that's the $10, and then it goes up $1 each year.
Well, the question that was issued on a statewide basis back in 14 was the question that's in the memo, which was simply, shall the minimum wage in Illinois for adults over 18 be raised to $10 per hour by January 1, 2015. Okay. So it was a much more simple question. It was statewide directed.
Right. Right.
Well, it's certainly conceivable that the people of Western Springs may take a different look at this if they see how detailed the county ordinance is. I don't know if that's been communicated to them, but this would, by referendum. I understand waiting until November may cause some objections with a lot of people, but it seems a lot more thorough to let them know this is what it's about, and not just the earlier referendum, which was $10 an hour.
See, the challenge is if all you do is reference the Cook County measure and say, should we vote in favor of that or vote against it, then you're going to have people in the ballot booth, trying to figure out what was the regulation. A referendum question has to have enough detail to give the voter a fair opportunity to vote yes or no if it's a yes or no question.
But these have to be sent to them, if I remember, sent to them in advance by law in the referendum. If something's going to be on a referendum, do they have to be given notice, either a mail publication?
Yeah, I have set forth in the memo that you're going to have to adopt if you're going to go a referendum route, a non-binding referendum route. We've got to have something approved on the 20th, and then it gets published. It gets sent to Cook County, the clerks, the election department, and they do a publication for the municipality. And this is, again, it's different than a binding referendum question. For instance, when we do bonds or something, that's set by statute. The question is dictated to us. With an advisory referendum question, you can pick up to 3 in any given election, and you get to pick the question. You get to write it yourself. So it's something that you'd have to take some pen to paper and figure out if you're going to go this direction, what question fairly asks what you want the public to give you an answer on.
But to be clear, two things, and I'm asking more than stating, I guess. One is we could address both the sick leave and the minimum wage separately. They would be separate questions, so it's not all in or all out, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct, and that's the way I've set up this draft resolution, is to deal with the minimum wage and the sick leave question as separate items.
Okay, and then the other thing would be too is just so I think everybody's clear, the question would be whether we opt back in or stay out. It's not as if we could come forward with our own unique minimum wage law, correct?
No.
Yeah, just want to be
not
sure.
Not under our home rule powers. I would not. I would not advocate trying to adopt a wage law. I think that's, to me personally, it's a state issue.
So I mean, just I think for everybody's understanding that might be watching is so the idea potentially of bringing the parties to the table and negotiating something different, that's really not a realistic approach either. So it's really more of in or out, basically. Is that?
And I think, again, that's part of the clarification that would be required, and possibly, again, hard to communicate that effectively.
But There's nothing that prevents us from communicating. I mean, the wording on the vote is going to be whatever it is, but we can provide additional clarity in other communications or mailings to the residents via like a Tower Topics.
Yes, just like with your other referendum that you've done, you know, the election law and referendum law says that a municipality, you know, can, you can't take a position on a referendum, you can't support it or be against it, but you can provide neutral, you know, basic information, you know, and essentially what you would be presenting to the community is Cook County adopted Ordinance X dealing with minimum wage. Its ordinance had read as follows. Cook County adopted Ordinance Y on sick leave. That sick leave benefit reads as follows. And the village is going to put those two issues to a non-binding advisory referendum vote to solicit the input of the community on these two issues. So you can certainly tee the questions up, so to speak, in a very uniform, objective, you know, not taking a position, neutral, you know, way, and then inform the community that it's going to come to them later in this, you know, later this year.
So can I ask a clarifying question that has to do with whether or not the issue tonight is to advance this to a stage where we're issuing another referenda, or is it something that we could address absent that?
So that's exactly the feedback I was hoping to get from the board was.
It seems to me that waiting till November would suggest to residents that we're not paying any attention to the last percentage of the residents that voted in favor of this measure. And so it seems to me that we're just delaying this, and I could be convinced to the contrary, but that's how it seems to me this evening. Whether we need to wait until November, or is this something that we could address as a board within the next couple of months? That's
the other
so
option.
I guess the question is do we as a board feel that we do have the pulse of the residents and that they understand specifically what we would be doing if we opt back in and the other dynamics that impact it?
Well, as a resident before I became a trustee, I was wondering how many of the residents and employees of the village that work in the village are affected by this minimum wage. And I've never gotten an answer, even from a group that I met or from listening to this board. And I'm wondering if we have any other data that can help us decide.
Mike O'Brien, when he was at the General Government Committee, did give an estimate of who would be impacted by the minimum wage and suggested that it was a relatively small number. I think it's the sick leave that is probably more impactful for both the workers as well as the businesses, because it would impact essentially everybody.
I see. And I would agree that that's the issue as well.
I think things too with respect to the age of the minimum wage, I think that has been clarified. I know at some of the meetings last year, I think there was some incorrect information presented as to who was affected by this.
Yeah, it's a good point as well. There was some confusion that this impacted potentially the business's ability to hire teenage workers, and teenage workers specifically are not included in this.
Right. And
so that's a good point as well, too.
Yeah.
18 and under.
Are not impacted.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of the action that the board took back in May, I believe the vote was 4-2. One trustee is still on the board that voted to stay in. The other trustee that voted to stay in is off the board now. So we do have, you know, a new board and a new potential dynamic here. So I don't know if anybody else has any feedback that they would want to offer at this point to provide some additional guidance.
I'm just not sure that, I mean, I don't want to push this down to November if there's something that we can do in a couple of months, but what I'm reading here on this proposed referendum seems significantly detailed, much more detailed than the earlier referendum, and we're talking about substantial step increases that will be binding for the next 5 years. This isn't just a one-time deal, well, let's start paying people $10 an hour. This is 10, 11, 12, 13, and possibly, I don't know what the CPI would be, but I've heard $15 an hour, maybe some, and that might be something we should spend more time possibly discussing. I'm not sure if the villagers would understand how detailed that county ordinance is.
Is there a means of getting a solid feedback from the village residents other than a referendum? I mean, is this something we would consider some sort of a survey or something? I mean, is that even possible?
We talked about that briefly in committee, but yeah, go ahead, Ingrid.
You could survey people, but then you'll have one group maybe more. I don't know if you would get a fair representation. So that's the issue. I think the concern was to go to a referendum that it would be more fair, but that's up to the board as to what you would like to do. It is difficult to survey on this item because even if you send it, you don't know who's going to respond, and if it's all village residents and so forth. So
yeah, I think there's no issue. Yeah, I think there's no perfect answer for that. Even the voters in the voting booth may not be well informed. So,
I was the trustee that Trustee Timick was referring to. I voted. I know they're all looking at me. I voted not to opt out. Basically based on the fact that 67.5% of our residents voted to go along with this ordinance, and so I felt like we are elected to represent our residents, and that was the reason. Also, at the time, I was told that LaGrange had not opted up. No, they opted in. I felt we would be at a disadvantage as a business, because I felt like if LaGrange was, if a person could get a job in either LaGrange or Western Springs, and LaGrange paid more than Western Springs, well, why would you work in Western Springs? So I don't know if LaGrange has.
So LaGrange opted out.
They opted out, though.
So the board vote was 3-3, and the village president actually cast the deciding vote.
Okay, that was after our vote, though.
Shortly
correct?
thereafter, but you're right,
Yes.
it was after, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I still feel that I will still, my vote would be to not opt out. The language is very confusing to me, but my vote would still be to not opt out, based solely on the fact that 67% of our residents also voted that way. And I feel they're intelligent voters and they knew what they were voting for. And, you know, I personally, I understand totally small businesses. I told you before, my husband owns a small business, but I do think, you know, this is the right thing to do.
But just to clarify, they voted for a single point $10 wage in 2015, and that's not what they would have gotten.
But wasn't the original?
Is that right?
I don't know, because I knew that it went up every year and everything.
Well, it's two different things, though. There's the
first
referenda, as
was different.
Attorney Druzik mentioned, was a single $10 by 2015 minimum
Period.
wage,
Okay.
period.
Yeah.
And then the Cook
now
County
it's something-
ordinance has the step function in it.
The
Correct.
first referendum was in 2014.
Right.
It has to
Okay.
be corrected, and it is single rate at up to $10.
And that
now
was
we have more.
statewide,
Yes,
too.
and it didn't include anything on the sick leave either. So.
Right. And then the one in 2016 is specifically on the sick leave, correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
Correct. And the statewide referendum on the minimum wage was put on the ballot by the Illinois General Assembly. The 2016 sick leave referendum was put on the ballot by the Cook County Board of Commissioners. There were two different pieces of legislation sponsored by two different entities, one state, one county.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, as one of the new trustees, I would join Trustee Hansen and the 67.5% of the residents. I think it's the right thing to do. I understand the argument that it's a state issue, but I don't agree with that. I think there are other cities, other large cities throughout the country who have taken this action, where the bigger cities are the ones where the cost of living is higher and people need to earn a better wage. I'm from downstate Illinois. The cost of living where my parents live, their houses, you know, they cost a quarter of what they cost here. I personally think it's the right thing to do, and I have always favored what Cook County was trying to do. And now you know where I would vote.
Well, I appreciate your feedback, everyone. But today's question, I think, it has to be answered first before we move on to that, and that's whether we want to pursue a referendum or referenda, or whether we want to decide this as a board.
My thought on that issue is not to wait until November and not to put this to the voters. I think we have a good idea of what the voters' wishes are, our responsibilities, individual responsibilities are to the voters. But I also believe that we as a board can learn enough in the next couple of months to be able to decide on our own, and that's the issue that I'm addressing, and that is not to put this on to the voters and wait until November. Let's look for a way to decide as a group before then.
Okay.
When's the deadline on the referendum?
August 20th would be when we would have to have it drafted and submitted.
Yeah, you're not up against a deadline on that issue.
Because we pushed it back to November. So, do we want to take an advisory vote to give the General Government Committee direction on how to move forward?
That would be great. I think we have 3 votes so far already. It's pretty clear.
Yeah.
So, Barry, do you have?
So, well, I know how I voted to delay it, and I'm sensitive to the comment about delaying further, and certainly we do represent our residents. I guess I'm troubled by what people voted on is going to be something very different from what they're actually going to get. So to me, that is a material difference, and I guess there's a lot of information that I don't feel I have, which would be the cost of the impact and what other villages are opting out or opting in. Whether we can get over that hurdle and make a decision ourselves without further input from the residents, we can. I mean, I guess I'm indifferent whether we get the more information ourselves without going to the residents, or get the information, give it to the residents, and then ask for them to vote. Personally, I kind of probably would lean more towards the latter, but right now I don't feel I have enough information to really decide one way or the other which way to vote. But I think more information is needed, and I don't think, if we're talking August, well, it depends when we're thinking of doing this vote, right? Because if we're not going to do the vote until July or August or how much time it's going to take us to get the information, are we really, what's the benefit of that relative to November?
Well, potentially what I was thinking we could do if we went that route was set some sort of a deadline here in the next couple of months, to Bill's point, to get the questions submitted back to General Government Committee. We can go back and do some additional research on this and try to answer the questions, the concerns of the trustees. And then we could still make a decision at that point whether we go with the referendum or not. Because again, we're having till August, we have plenty of time. And we could then potentially take action in a couple months if the consensus of the board is we don't need to wait for the referendum. Myself personally, I would really like to do the referendum, because I do think, to your point, there are material differences. I am troubled by the November date. When we first brought this up, I really had wanted to try to do this in March, and we just didn't have enough time. I wish we had thought of it sooner, I guess. But I'd like to maybe suggest that route is go the information collection and review process over the next 2 months, 3 months max, something like that. And then at that point, we can reassess it and either decide to move to a vote or go with the referendum route, something along those lines.
Sure.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask this question about the issue? Can they be bifurcated? The issue of
Most definitely.
Minimum wage and the sick leave?
Yes.
2 separate ordinances, 2 separate actions.
All right. Very good.
Cook County ordinance has both of them, right?
It's 2 separate ordinances.
It's 2 separate issues, so we would be able to address them separately as a body.
So the original vote of this board was covering both?
Was to cover both and to revisit the issue after, if the state didn't act
Yes.
sometime after December 31st of 17.
Yeah.
And so, clearly, you can address each of them separately, vote on them separately, go different directions, or you can deal with them together and go in the same direction, whichever direction that is.
Okay.
You totally have the options here.
Jim, would you be okay with that approach?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe that concludes my report.
Wonderful, thank you. Moving on to public health and safety, trustee Zimmerman. Oh, sure.
Did you want to comment on the strategic plan?
Oh, thank you for the reminder. Yes, sorry about that. So the output from the strategic planning session that we did a month or two ago has actually been collated, and all of the priorities have been made. There is a report forthcoming that the board will all receive. Gives a chance to digest the information, and then village staff will be planning a follow-up meeting for us to get back together and take a look at that in the near future. So take a look for that in your email. Thank you for the reminder.
Yes, thank you. Okay, now moving on, trustee Zimmerman.
Okay. Madam President, the Public Health and Safety Committee met on January 4th. The only item agendized was the formal request by the police department to purchase 2 new squad cars at the cost of $56,006, and to declare the existing 4-year-old squad car with over 63,000 miles as surplus property. The rationale presented and documented by D.C. Albrecht's memo was very clear and convincing. The cost of these 2 squad cars would not include the cost to equip the vehicles with some of the high-tech police equipment and safety equipment for these vehicles. Trustee Allen and I have added this matter to tonight's agenda with a request to advance this for formal board approval on the omnibus.
Thank you. And I believe this was budgeted for 2018.
Yes.
Thank you.
That concludes my report.
Oh, thank you. Moving on to Finance Committee, trustee Rudolph.
Thank you, President Gallagher. I have no report this evening. I let all the contract renewals go on ahead, so thank you.
Thank you. Planning and Zoning, trustee Terrell.
Thank you, President Gallagher. The weather that trustee Allen had discussed earlier has stopped construction at Foxford temporarily. They do have the foundation and the first floor walls up. We drive by there, we can see that. Once the weather breaks a little bit, they're going to put up a precast deck and also the support columns for the second floor. There's a website, foxfordstation.com, that is a little more thorough, and that's where the members of the village that are watching should look there if they're interested in it. Other questions that are more specific, contact the village, Marty Scott, or even myself, and I can send them questions along. That's all I'd have.
Thank you. So they are planning on continuing with construction through the winter when weather permits.
That's my understanding, yes.
Thank you. And that's it, okay. Moving on to the consideration of an action on the resolution 18-2417, trustee Timick.
President Gallagher, I move that the following resolution as contained on the meeting agenda for January 5th, 2018 be adopted and approved. Resolution 18-2417, authorizing and improving an updated harassment policy, including sexual harassment, to conform to Illinois Public Act 100-0554.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
I will second. I think the date you meant to say was January 8th, though.
Yes, thank you.
Any discussion? May we have a roll call vote, Clerk Fitzgerald?
Trustee Hansen.
Aye.
Trustee Timick.
Aye.
Trustee Allen.
Aye.
Trustee Rudolph.
Aye.
Trustee Sifferman.
Aye.
Trustee Tyrrell.
Aye.
And President Gallagher.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to reports. My report, you'll see in your packet, there's an application from John Mikulich. He has agreed to accept an appointment to the Recreation Commission for a 3-year term to expire in January 2021. I'll recommend that for approval at our next meeting if there's no objection. And otherwise, I'd just like to add my voice to Trustee Allen's regarding the outstanding work of the Public Works Department during our terrible storm or terrible cold weather snap that we had. And we really appreciate the hard work and always consistently going above and beyond the call. So thank you very much. And that concludes my report. Village Manager Belknap.
I would just like to thank the board for your kind comments with regard to our Public Works and all of our other employees that are working to make sure that everyone is safe during these cold days. And again, we have a thaw coming up, and also Happy New Year, and I hope to have a very prosperous and productive New Year. That's it.
Thank you. Village Attorney Jurusik?
No further report tonight.
Thank you. In that case, I'll entertain a motion to recess to closed session
I will move to recess to closed session.
for the purpose.
I just lost, my thing just went down. For the purpose of discussing real estate, someone took
The purchase or lease?
For the purpose of discussing the purchase or lease of real property for use by the village and pending litigation. Do I need to read all this? No.
I second.
As noted by the citations.
Sorry.
Okay.
I just
All in
lost-
favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Roll call vote.
Oh, roll call.
Yep.
Thank you. Clerk Fitzgerald.
Trustee Hansen,
Present?
Trustee Timick,
Or no, do I say aye?
Aye.
I'm sorry, aye. I thought we were doing roll call like we're here. Aye, okay. I have a cold.
Trustee Timick,
Aye.
Trustee Allen.
Aye.
Trustee Rudolph,
Aye.
Trustee Sifferman.
Aye.
Trustee Tyrrell.
Aye.
All right, thank you. We will adjourn to closed session. After we conclude our business, we will come back to our open meeting, but only for the purpose to adjourn for the evening. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attendance tonight.